This week on the Frame Savers, we flex on the competition. This is the Frame Savers, and this is episode number 78. If you're new to the podcast, we are a retro video game podcast that focuses on speedrunning. Speedrunning is a hobby where we try to beat video games as quickly as possible using whatever tricks, glitches, and strategies available to us. And right now we are live on twitch.tv/theframesavers, so shout outs to our chat. Also shout outs to YouTube if you're watching later. And we are really excited to do our cart swap episode, our third cart swap episode. If you're new to cart swap, this is where Chad and I trade off giving each other games to speedrun, generally games that have been only mildly speedrun and possibly have room for improvement. And so the other does not know which game we're giving them. And so we've actually recorded the first half of this episode weeks ago, and we're going to be able to play that for you. And then we're going to go ahead and do the second half live here. But it is also our 3-year anniversary. So happy anniversary, Chad.
Happy anniversary to you. I didn't really get you anything. I did buy a party hat.
Oh, wow. Nice.
So I was prepared.
I thought you were going to get me lilies or something. I love lilies.
No, so the thing is that third anniversaries are typically the crystal or the glass anniversary. So cheers.
I don't even know what that means. Glass? You give somebody... What kind of glass gifts do you give somebody?
Yeah, I don't get it fully.
Like blown glass?
Maybe trinkets or something like that. I'm using it as an excuse to drink, so here we
Nice.
are.
Well, that does, I think fairly represent what it would be like to do a podcast with me for 3 years. You might as well go ahead and drink.
It's fairly on
but
brand.
we gave each other gifts. We didn't plan it this way, but we did give each other video games to speedrun, so that's exciting.
That's true.
What have you been doing in speedrunning outside of maybe the project that we don't want to reveal yet?
Yeah, I guess much to your chagrin, I've been playing a lot of La Mulana, but I did, as of last night, finish La Mulana, so that is done, which means it's time for La Mulana 2. So
La Mulana has really ruined you.
I get it because of the ruins.
Yeah.
It's been a lot of fun. It's been really enjoyable. It took me like probably somewhere between 30 and 40 hours to beat. My recorded time on my file isn't exactly accurate, but it's been a great game. Super stoked to play the second one. As far as speedrunning goes, I've been playing my cart swap game. I've been playing a variety of other things. I actually just got knocked out of the Super Mario World 96 Invitational Tournament. I was the number 17 seed, so it was, I guess, the world's smallest upset for me to beat the number 16 seed in round one. But then that means I have to go up against the number 1 seed in the next round. So
imagine a tournament where you aren't the number 1 seed. I'm trying to comprehend it.
I don't understand why you would organize a group of people together in which I am not the best of the selections.
I don't get it either. That's great, man.
But that happened. I got knocked out. It was a great tournament. I think this is actually a really good sign for speedrunning going forward. There seems to be a lot of these events spinning up where it's less about getting the entire community involved at once. I mean, we've kind of seen what happens with that, with like Speed Gaming having their 512 member tournaments. And so now there's these tournaments that are spinning up that are for profit. So the tournament has a cash prize for the top however many competitors, and they're typically invitationals, so it's a smaller number of participants. So this Super Mario World one was just the top 32 participants. The top 32 PBs that applied for the tournament got to participate, and everything just ran so much more smoothly than any tournament I've ever been a part of. It was just,
Yeah.
they said you've got 1 week to finish round one, and everyone finished with plenty of time to spare. So,
Nice. Is that one for cash as well?
yeah. So the top
Wow.
prize, the finalists, whoever wins the tournament, is going to get some cash prize. I don't remember what it was. I certainly didn't invest myself too heavily in remembering it because I didn't think there was any chance I would,
Yeah.
win. But at the same time, it's just kind of fun. It gets everyone just a little bit more excited. It makes the viewers just a little more invested in it, and
Sure.
I think keeping the size smaller makes everything a lot better managed. So.
Yeah, it's definitely the way things are going. I know there's there's going to be a big Link to the Past open tournament coming up, and they're doing top 8, and that's going to be cash prizes. So they're doing all these qualifiers to set that up. But then once it happens, it's going to be all really great matchups. You're not going to have those lopsided matchups. You're not going to have 512 people in it. And I know for next the big fall tournament, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to cut way down on the number of people who qualify to enter that. So it is kind of an interesting change to see that. So for me, myself, I've been doing a little bit of Game Boy Quest. I've been doing a good bit of my cart swap game, and also some Link to the Past rando per usual. Also some Fortnite offline with some Twitch buds. There's Twitch buds out there that will play the Fortnites, and also just taking a little bit of time off streaming this, just past week to spend some time with friends and get some stuff done. So, but
You got to
enjoying doing a little
re-energize
more.
once in a while. You just got to
Yeah,
re-energize.
but enjoyed a lot doing a good amount of speedrunning for this game that you'll find out about. It was I mean, a few hundred attempts for sure. So I definitely over a couple of days put the work in. So it was a lot of fun. Looking forward to picking up some new speed games soon. So moving on from that, we do have some upcoming events. Big Bad Gameathon 2018 is coming up, which I believe both of us are running in, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
I've got 3 games and 2 speed runs and one thing I'm showing off. So
What are those going to be?
I'm speedrunning Flynn and Freckles, which was the PlayStation 4 game that I had been running for a while. I'm playing Garfield's Super Scary Scavenger Hunt 2, which is a Flash game that I thought was very appropriate for Big Bad Gameathon. And then the last one was a Steam game, a really terribly made Steam game that I thought I was going to speedrun until I realized that it was just too bad to speedrun.
Oh, now I remember.
Pears
Okay,
and Grey Witch. And I never finished playing it because I just could not force myself to complete it. So I offered it up as an exhibition for Big Bad Gameathon.
nice.
So I'm going to play it for like half an hour or an hour or something like that.
Yeah, I watched you play that, and it almost felt like the developers were wanting to see how much you could go through before you were willing to quit.
Yeah,
Like
they
it
were
did not
testing
feel
your
like they
resolve.
wanted you to beat it. Like that felt like the whole point of the game. So that's pretty funny. I'll be doing a race with Sharif, most likely with a Barbie Game Girl
Mm-hmm.
for the Game Boy. So that'll be a lot of fun. And yeah, so that'll be on twitch.tv/Big Bad Gameathon. That's September 14th to the 16th. So look for that. You can see your favorite podcasters playing in that. We also have a Speedrun Showcase 2018 Fall Edition. So that's live from Next Level Video Games in Blackwood, New Jersey. And you can find that on twitch.tv/NL Video Games. What exactly is that?
So that's there's a retro video game shop there that is owned by friends of a few speedrunners, and so they've started organizing these live events in New Jersey. They have submissions. People are allowed to submit their games and come by, and they host the event at their shop. It's just kind of a
Awesome.
nice little in terms of these like regional meetups. It's a fairly small scale one, but it's happening in New Jersey, which is an area that's not exactly covered by other regional meetups. So it's nice to promote it and be able to get the word out. If you are in the lower New England area within the region of New Jersey, then maybe that's something you want to look into next time
Yeah.
around.
Also, we don't have it on the list, but Southeastern Speedrun Summit is coming up Labor Day weekend, I believe, right?
Oh yeah, that's correct. I actually don't have it on here yet because they haven't posted a. I always pull events coming up from our calendar, but I don't put things on the calendar until they have a actual schedule posted, and so I just
Yeah.
haven't put it on here yet. So
So keep an eye out for that. That's twitch.tv/South Is it
No,
just
it's southern.
Southeastern
It's
Speedruns?
just southern
Southern Speedruns.
speedruns.
Southern Speedruns. I'm sorry, Southern
Yeah.
Speedruns. So go check that out. I believe Auth will be there and doing some runs with a bunch of our friends. So that'll be a lot of fun. So check that out. So this is a cart swap episode. If you're new to the podcast or maybe you've missed the previous ones, what this is we exchange games with each other that haven't seen a lot of speedrun attention. And so previously, we've had not the greatest luck giving each other games. I would say would
Yeah, no,
so.
it's been rough. The first time around, I got a game that I was okay with, but you weren't particularly satisfied with what I gave you. The second time around, you were okay with your game. You didn't love it, but I didn't even finish a run of mine. I was struggling too much with it. So this time, I think that we really dug deep and said, let's make sure that we give each other a game that we're both happy about. It's not just, you get a game that I want to see you play, and I get a game you want to see me play. We tried to actually play to each other's actual interest, and I think we're getting better at it. So
Absolutely. I mean, it's the glass anniversary. We're working towards it, and so we've been a little bit, secretive so far in this recording. Not releasing the names of the games, but you obviously see them in the title. We've also been pretty unprivate about it. We tweeted about them and stuff, but it's going to be a lot of fun to do this. But the way we're doing this, since we've never done a cart swap episode live before, we've always done them pre-recorded, is that we have a pre-recorded video that we're going to play here on Twitch. Doesn't really make much sense to those of you listening on the podcast, but we're going to go ahead and play this pre-recorded video of us revealing the games to each other, guessing which games we're going to get, and kind of giving each other background on them. So get excited to look for that. We will be back afterward, though, to talk about the speed runs and talk about our experiences. So this is cart swap number 3. We're real excited to be able to exchange these games. Neither of us knows what's coming. We both are a little bit nervous.
I'm anxious. I'm anxious.
We've been in this relationship for 3 years, and sometimes in a relationship, like, you click on certain levels, you don't click on other levels. And me and Auth, we have a great friendship. Everything's been solid, but we're not the best at giving each other presents, right? That's something we're working on in a relationship. And I think today is going to be a big step in the right direction.
I take it personally. I'm bad at giving gifts in all of my relationships.
So I'm just optimistic. I think today we're learning about each other, and we're just going to grow this relationship. And to make this a bit fun, we want to play 20 questions. I keep calling it 10 questions. That's not a game, apparently.
I had to inform him that 20 questions is the name of the game.
I live in DC. We move fast here. We cut it in half. Give us 10 questions. That's where I grew up. So I'm going to let you start off with your questions and let's see what happens.
Okay. Is it for the NES?
No.
Oh, I'm actually being counted on this one. Is it for the Game Boy?
No.
I don't want to just narrow down the console, but I feel like that's my best choice. Is it a 2D game?
No.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Is it PlayStation?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So
we're 4.
That's tough. Now, okay. So I know it's PlayStation. So let's enter into a library I know nothing about. Is it a platformer?
Yes.
Oh, man. We're heading into dangerous territory because I'm pretty sure I'm running out of questions where I can properly differentiate anything.
You can throw in the flag at any time. It's fine.
Okay. Is this a relatively popular PlayStation game?
No.
I just don't think I know PlayStation well enough to dive too deep into this. I think I'm gonna throw in the flag. I think I'm happy knowing.
Also, I'll give you a couple hints, and then we'll see if you get there. So he's thrown in the flag. For the flow of the podcast, that's probably for the best. We don't need you sitting there thinking for 10 minutes. But this game was developed by Argonaut Games. Do you know who they are?
Yes, I know that.
So they made Star Fox and invented the SFX chip, Super FX chip. Okay. And it was published on the PC by Sony Interactive, but on PlayStation 1 by Disney Interactive, and Sony Computer Entertainment on the PS1. Does that give you any hints?
So this is a Disney license.
Yes.
Oh man, no, I don't know what it is, but now I'm eager to find out.
Okay, so this game is called Aladdin Nasira's Revenge. Okay. So I'm going to tell you about this game. We've got a lot of interesting information coming here. So
Okay.
you can sit on the edge of your seat. So this game was released in 2000 in Europe and 2002 in the US on PC, and in North America 2001 on PC. I'm sorry. Let me try that again. Europe in 2000 for the PlayStation, 2002 PC, and then in North America in March 2001 on both the PC. So that for some reason the PC version came out before the European version in North America, but the PlayStation one came out before. I've never seen that. I thought that was strange.
So is this like a
But
proper 3D game, or is it one of those
yes.
2.5D
No,
games?
no, it's a 3D game, full 3D. So they also designed the Croc series and the
Mm-hmm.
PlayStation 1 Harry Potter games.
Oh,
And as I said earlier, most notable for developing Star Fox on the Super Nintendo and creating the Super FX chip. They also, for some reason, like they passed some sort of test, like they proved to Nintendo that they could hack the Game Boy hard key, you know, that no third party games, like that they,
right.
I guess they helped them in that way. Then and they showed them the Super FX, and yeah, they were a developer from 1982 to 2004. They actually did a bunch of like Atari stuff and all of those, but Croc, Harry Potter, Star Fox, that's like their most popular stuff. And here's the lore of this Aladdin game. So there were 3 Aladdin movies. Are you aware?
I was.
So the original one was a blockbuster hit. I'm not going to go into the plot and all these things because we've all seen this movie, and I'm not going to
The
go into
next
the
two
other
were
ones. But
straight to
yeah,
VHS.
they were. So this movie cost $28 million and it grossed $504 million worldwide. So
Wow.
they made 18 times their money. Got a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. You know, everybody loved Aladdin. Great franchise. And so there was a second movie that came out called Return of Jafar that some of us may remember. Direct to video. It was originally planned to be a TV special. So I'm going to go through some of the lore of these movies so we know where this fits in the lore, because you got to respect the lore. You got to respect the lore. So this movie was originally planned to be a TV special, but they went straight to video instead. This guy, Tad Jones, he was a Disney producer, an animator, all this stuff. He was stated saying to put the film in theatrical pipeline would have taken up to 5 years, but releasing it home video is less than 2 years. So clear cash grab. They say Aladdin came out. We got to make that money on the Aladdin. It's going to take us 5 years to come up with it. If we do do a proper Hollywood release. So they just went straight to video. I remember watching this as a kid and having it because you're like, oh, another Aladdin. Everybody loved Aladdin. There was actually a fallout with Robin Williams. So Robin Williams is not in the second Aladdin.
Yeah,
And
Dan Castellaneta was the
yep,
genie.
Yep. So basically they used some of Robin Williams' voice acting for some marketing materials, and apparently he had I guess previously stated or agreed that they would not do that. He did not want that. And so he refused to do this movie. So he's replaced, as you said, Dan Castellaneta, that's a tongue twister, who's the voice of Homer Simpson. It's kind of funny. It was considered to be way less costly way of basically meeting the need for more Aladdin content, because obviously why would you risk doing something that made 18 times your money? You don't want to do that. You might as well just release something real quick. And it was actually for the most notably the first Disney sequel that went straight to VHS. So no movie had ever done this. In the Disney world. It received a 33% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yikes.
Not great. Not a 94. Big oof on that. David Nasser of RealFilm.com. Here's his analysis of the movie. It's clear right from the outset that Disney put very little effort into the production of Return of Jafar, particularly in the realm of animation. And then later says, The Return of Jafar is a thoroughly needless sequel that may keep small children engaged, but is bound to come off as nothing less than a huge disappointment for fans of the original. Not your biggest praise. However, Siskel and Ebert gave it 2 thumbs up.
Wow.
Fun fact. So, I mean,
I don't recall them having ever given anything other than 2 thumbs up. I can't recall someone ever saying Siskel and Ebert gave this
1 thumb up,
3 thumbs sideways. Like,
yeah.
What's the other option?
It sold 15 million copies, which is a lot, and grossed over $300 million. So it still made a whole ton of money for them. So
I'm sure
it was
Disney
probably
was really sad about all the reviews.
Yeah, I'm sure they cared real bad. And then there was a third movie which I wasn't aware of, also straight to video.
That was one of my favorites growing up.
King of Thieves, Aladdin King of Thieves. And this came out in 1996. It was inspired by Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. And following the success of Return of Jafar, there was also like a television series as well, which I remember growing up on. It was actually, I remember it being very good. So it was not a disappointment to me as a kid. I don't know if I went back at it, it would look like, the Nintendo cartoons, like the Mega Man cartoon. But when I watched it seemed well made. And so Disney announced in January 1995 that a third film was in production, and later in June that it was scheduled to be released in 1996. And in September 1995, it was confirmed that Robin Williams would come back as the genie. So that's exciting because basically he asked for $1 million salary, which I don't know if that was excessive at the time. I mean, it sounds like a lot of money for voice acting in a cartoon. But after he received an apology from Joe Roth from Disney for breaching his agreement, so he got his apology, got his money, came back as the genie, and I think we all remember. If you've never seen Aladdin, Robin Williams, great American actor, great comedian, and dramatic actor, like really great at both. Was a big part of why the first Aladdin was so good. I mean, his manic personality and just the way he performed that role was one of the extra special parts of the movie for sure, along with the music. And so he came back. This seems to be a bit better received than Return of Jafar. The ratings, from what I read on like Rotten Tomatoes and other stuff, seem like about the same. But everything I read, everybody seemed to have liked this more. So I guess it just doesn't reflect in the numbers. Sold 10 million copies and grossed $130 million, according to the Wall Street Journal. So still made a bunch of money. So Nasira's Revenge, this is the game we're talking about. This fits in the timeline, in the lore between Return of Jafar and King of Thieves. So it's in between these two movies during the television series.
Okay.
Part of the lore. And so Jafar's sister Nasira wants to bring him back to life. Okay. And so she takes over the palace with a spell. You hate to see that. It's not what you're looking for. Kidnaps Jasmine and the Sultan, and then he commands the guards captain Razul, who I think was a character in the cartoon a lot. I think he was in the movies too, to bring her Aladdin, dead or alive. Man, I mean, very dark, not cool. Nasira believes if she collects all the relics scattered throughout Agrabah, she can revive Jafar and take over the world. And the game ends with her reviving Jafar, and you have to fight both of them in her volcanic lair. So that's pretty cool. But so Aladdin, you smash the artifacts at the end, so you break the spell. So what is this game? It's a 3D adventure platformer. The player assumes control of Aladdin for the most part, but also can control Abu a bit, and also Jasmine in just one specific scene in which she's in a pot, and it's a stealth scene. Okay. And it's a really typical, like, standard 3D platformer, basically. I'm not going to have much to talk about gameplay wise, but most of the levels involve some platforming, some combat, a bit similar to the Hobbit game we just talked about, kind of, not great platforming, not great combat, not great this, but just mixes it up a bit. You'll have, levels where you're on the carpet and they're kind of auto scrollers. You'll have this stealth section where you're sneaking out with Jasmine. Yeah, you have some stages you have to do as Abu, and so it's pretty cool. It's an early 3D platformer for sure. It has that appearance to it. There's some mini games in between levels, and you can get coins to buy upgrades. But that's about all I have to say about the game. I think we're going to hear a lot more about the game once Off has dived deep into it. But I'm excited about this because, one, I've got one part of it that you're going to really like. Okay. That's going to make it an even better present. So, like, right now you're already intrigued, right? Okay. 3D platformer, you weren't expecting that. And, like, that seems to be up your alley lately. You did The Hobbit again. You did Dark Sky, all that stuff. You work with Nick's Report on those things, sure. Right? So Bubsy 3D. So that's been kind of on brand for you. This is an hour and 10-minute long speed run by Zakurtsu, who pretty good speedrunner, sub 130 in Link to the Past. So that's something we haven't done and such. Yeah. But it definitely, he put a bunch of time into it. There's no tutorial, but his full playthrough, he commentated after getting the PB. So he talks about a lot of what he does. So that'll help you direct learning it. Okay. But also, Nick's Report has already looked into it. I've spoken to him. He says he has up to 12 minutes of time saved that can go into this game, which, and I definitely see, like, Zakurtsu, like, executed fairly well, but there's definitely a bunch of parts where that could be improved. But also, I think the routing really can be improved. Okay. Like a lot of death warps, a lot of stuff. And I know that's right up your alley. And Nix has already played with it. So I hit Nix up this morning. I was like, Nix, can you help author this game? And he's like, I've already found 12 minutes of time save. I was like, typical Nix, man. He already knew about it. He was already ready. So I think you can take this to a sub hour time, maybe.
Maybe. That does
You might
sound
be.
that sounds ambitious, but that sounds fun.
Yeah. So I think you'll enjoy trying to find like the structures there. You
Right.
just got to color it in. It's time for the author blues routing, just to fit it, polish out a little of those things, get Nix to find some glitches. So I'm real excited about it. It apparently has poor controls, which I know
Oh,
you
thank
love.
God.
You love bad
I was
controls in
really
3D
worried that
games.
this was finally going to be a game that
Yeah,
controlled properly.
yeah. It apparently the camera is half the battle, so that's good. That was said very early in the video. So I mean, it seems look exactly like what you would want. So
Yeah. This is
I
my
think you're gonna
dream.
enjoy this one. Yeah,
So this
I'm
is
excited about
PlayStation
it.
1, not PlayStation 2, right?
PlayStation 1. I have the copy for you with the manual in case you need the
Wow.
manual. It's been purchased. I saw it on a desk at East Starland. They were doing like a yard sale thing with like their less like nice labeled stuff that they
Sure.
can't sell out front, so they do it for a lot cheaper. And I saw that game there. I was like, that's an interesting. And I looked, I was like, oh, it's got a couple speed runs, got 3 runs on the board. So I'm very excited. Very excited to watch you play this.
Very nice.
Absolutely. So is it my turn to get a present?
It is your turn to get a present.
Okay.
And you already know a little bit about it.
Yeah,
So some things that I already talked to John about when I was sort of working through finding something for him is I have a tendency to try to focus on Game Boy because it's sort of John's wheelhouse, and if I'm trying to find a game that I think John's ultimately going to enjoy, I tend to stick to Game Boy. And so
I gave you 2 Game Boy games for the other 2 cart swaps. So if you're new to this is the first episode. What did we swap? You gave me Super Robin Hood, and I gave you Cosmo Tank for the Game Boy. And then the second one, I gave you the Smurfs for the Game Boy, and you gave me Adventures of the Magic Kingdom. Yeah. So I've given the Game Boy, but I haven't received a Game Boy.
Right.
So, but I know that it's a Game Boy game.
Right.
Which
So
maybe that should count as one of my questions.
No, it's fine. It's fine. That's just something John already knows going into this, is because I asked him some questions about his Game Boy Quest.
And
stuff,
I know it's American release because you said you looked up something on my Game Boy Quest, which I know is only American titles. So I just want to spoil that I know those 2 steps.
Okay. All right. What's next?
Okay. Is this made by a third-party developer?
Yes.
Okay. Is the third-party developer Konami?
Yes.
Okay, we're already 2 questions in. I know it's not Kid Dracula. I've already run it and done an episode on it. We can't do those. Not Operation C. Oh, what's made by Konami? Is this a platformer?
It is.
It can't be the Castlevania games. Is it one of the Castlevania games?
Mm-mm.
I just gotta go ask it. See, now I feel bad because now I've got to ask questions to fill up the content too, because I'm podcasting. Oh my gosh, Konami platformer. Is it cutesy?
I wouldn't say so.
Okay. Konami. Oh wow, I cannot believe I'm choking this. Adventure Island is not Konami. What did Konami make? Is it related to the Bubble Bobble series?
Nope.
Is that Konami?
Are you talking about Rainbow Islands?
Yeah.
No.
That's Konami though, isn't it? I think it is.
That game? No, it's Taito, I thought.
Oh, yeah, it is Taito. Is it I'm gonna have to throw in the towel soon. I'm so disappointed. I feel like if we weren't doing this in a podcast,
yeah, you'd have time to think about it a little bit.
Yeah. Dang. So it's a platformer. Have I played it in Game Boy Quest yet?
No.
Okay, I'm just gonna let you go for the sake of the content of the episode. Go ahead. You can start giving me hints or explaining.
Yeah, so I was trying to find a game that I thought you would really like, and I thought I could use Game Boy Quest to help me. Just take a look at what you thought about some game.
I've rated them, so you know if I like it or not. Right?
That was kind of my idea. I thought if I saw a rating that was like 6 or higher, then that meant you liked it enough that you probably wouldn't hate playing it again. But you hadn't played it, which on one hand is sort of a risky gambit on my part, but at the same time, it also kind of helps you because now you'll have played it for Game Boy Quest as well.
Yeah, it'll be an easier Game Boy Quest submission because I can speedrun it.
Exactly. So the game is actually Zen Intergalactic Ninja.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I would not have guessed that was Konami. That's a rare Game Boy.
Yeah, it goes for about $30 almost these days.
But it's hard to find too. Yeah. Like it might go for $30, which isn't crazy. That's a lot for a Game Boy game. It's nothing for an NES game.
For sure.
But it's also like legitimately one where you like there's a lot of times there's no copies on
the
eBay,
NES games
or they're all
$70
too.
The NES game's about 70.
Yep.
So this was developed and published by Konami in March of 1993, and it's much better known for its NES version, also called Zen Intergalactic Ninja. But it's based on a comic book series that was started in 1987 by Stephen L. Stern and Dan Cote. And so the premise of the game, or rather the premise of the comic book specifically, is that Zen is a native of the planet Baltoon,
Of
and he was
course.
born as a genetic experiment. So he has
Sure.
these extra powers. He's telepathic, even with creatures on
Happens.
far off planets that he can communicate with. And
Oh
he's,
wow.
yeah, and he's,
No long distance plan for Zen.
no, he can make
No,
those
he's
long distance
good.
calls.
Yeah.
He's also telekinetic, so he can make objects and even himself hover.
Dang.
So he was a genetic experiment, but the experiment was deemed a failure, and so the scientists were ordered to kill Zen. But one of
Oh
the
wow.
scientists
Harsh.
involved in the project smuggled him out and launched him in a shuttle pod to a far-off world where he was raised as an acolyte to a mysterious order of martial artists called the Mystic
Sure.
Masters of Om.
I
And
mean,
so,
that's all like your typical. We've all been there.
yeah,
Been there, done that.
that's your typical alien comic book plot. So
Yeah.
basically, he's trained as a martial artist and he hires himself out as a mercenary.
So he's telekinetic. He's got kinesis and he knows martial arts.
Yeah, he's the full
Just living his
package.
best life. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
he's the whole
goodness sake.
package. Um, so the original run of the comics was done sort of in-house by the creators under the title of Zen Comics Publishing, and it was designed by Stephen L. Stern with a specific environmental subtext. So the initial concept being designed pretty close to the original Earth Day. So it has a sort of the Captain Planet vibe of, keep the whole planet clean and that kind of thing. That's the premise of it. He was having a hard time shopping it around. He actually devised the comic originally in 1987, but it didn't get
So
its
you're
first.
giving me liberal propaganda to play as a video game.
Yeah, I mean, if by liberal propaganda you mean please don't pollute the earth.
Yeah, that's a
Sorry.
partisan issue.
Sorry about that. So the first publishing of it was pretty unassuming. It had a very amateurish style, not to be too disparaging, but the art style for the original comics weren't very nice. But it sort of started to achieve a lot more popularity in the 90s when the comic series was picked up by Archie Comics.
Okay.
And then only a few years after that was finally acquired by Entity Comics, which were likely involved in the creation of the game due to the timing. Entity Comics picked it up right around 1993, which coincides with the date of the two games coming out, so it's very likely involved with that process. There was actually a modern reboot of the Zen franchise comic book side in 2015 under the label
Oh, wow.
of Devil's Due, with a full redesign of the character, completely reimagined. But it's kind
That's
of,
really cool.
as far as
Who made it before Archie?
it was completely designed in house. Stephen L. Stern
Okay. Okay.
was having a hard time finding someone to produce his comic book. He had the idea and the script written out, but he couldn't find an illustrator who wanted to take the project. And Dan Cote was the guy who picked it up. He found it because Stephen L. Stern, I think, was doing some freelance work, and he ended up producing some work for a woman with like an ice cream shop, and her son happened to be an illustrator. And so he like
Oh, wow.
sat down with the guy's son, who was relatively young at the time, and he's like, well, here's a picture of an alien I drew. And so they sort of workshopped the idea
Oh, wow.
to become Zen eventually.
That's really cool because Archie. I'm not a big comic book person or whatever, but I've known about this game existing for some time because, even before I was collecting for Game Boy, like you said, the NES cartridge is also fairly uncommon and goes for a decent price. And I never knew that it was a comic, let alone that it was actually like a comic. Archie Comics is like one of the more legit ones, like with DC and Marvel. So it's kind of cool to know it has that much going into it. It's
Yeah.
like a licensed title. I never really thought of it as like a licensed title or whatever. So
Yeah, I tried to find some reviews for the games. It's pretty hard to find. I found Nintendo Power issues 48 and 45 covered the game. The issue 45 covered the NES game a little bit and sort of gave some tips and tricks and walkthroughs, and 48 covered the Game Boy game. There's archives of Nintendo Power Online now that you can go through and read. So as far as the game's concerned, it's a relatively standard platformer. When I first watched it, the impression that I got was it was sort of the meeting of Ninja Gaiden and Mega Man. It has sort of that feel for it. The platforming itself really kind of looks and feels like a Ninja Gaiden game, but the way that you play the game is that there's sort of one big boss, and then he has all of his little minion bosses, and so you can pick the order of the stages you want to do them in
Okay.
order to beat each of those bosses individually, and then once you've beaten them all, then you can take on the big boss. So it's kind of like the robot masters going into Dr.
Sure.
Wily. And so you get to make your choices that way. There's 4 levels that can be done in any order before you go and fight the final boss. As far as the gameplay is concerned, it's a relatively straightforward platformer. You carry around this bow staff that can shoot projectiles, and you can even charge up the projectiles as well. So it's kind of like Mega Man's Buster. It's a pretty straightforward game. It does have some speed runs. They're relatively short. I think it's something in like the 13 to 15 minute range. But it looks like a lot of
Not by the
fun.
time I get done with it.
There you go. From what I hear, the controls can be a little bit stiff.
I
But
remember it being I think I've seen Mo or somebody who was doing the Game Boy console challenge playing it and like hating it, but like that it probably controls weird and stuff. But
right,
that doesn't mean that the speed run wouldn't possibly be like, it sounds like a very interesting type of game. So
right,
I didn't know it was like saying it's like Ninja Gaiden and Mega Man gets me intrigued,
right.
if you will.
Yeah, when I started looking up gameplay footage of the game, I immediately got the idea of Ninja Gaiden Shadow, and I was like, well,
Hmm.
I think John will probably enjoy
I
this
love Ninja
game.
Gaiden
So,
Shadow. That's a great game.
so,
So
so I'm
yeah, and
hopeful.
you're making my future job easier for me, no matter what.
There you go.
Because like I have to do this, and then Game Boy Quest gets one more free.
One free game.
Yeah, that's like point something percent of all the games I have to play. So that's mildly useful. Thank you.
Yeah, so trying to do a
So
little bit better about giving John a John. We,
absolutely,
we talked about this before, but we've had a problem in the past of John giving me John games and me giving
yep.
John me games.
And I think that was kind of the intent at first, to see what we would like about each other's games. But
Sure.
I think it was, we were due for one that the other person would enjoy a bit more. So
Yeah.
I'm super stoked to watch you do this Aladdin game, because I can see, I mean, you'll hear multiple times in the speedrun where he talks about a death warp would save time here, but blah blah blah. And I think some of those things, like, you could just game over, and the game over's super quick, like 5 seconds,
Right.
restock on lives. So I think there's a lot of time to be saved there. And then the fact that Nix has looked into it. So if anybody's not aware, Nix Report is a really good glitch finder, specifically for this type of game, 3D games, like early 3D games. And so Auth and him have worked together with Bubsy, I believe, was probably the first one, and then Darkened Sky a lot. And I even brought up another 3D platformer I'm looking into possibly speedrunning. I might check out Barbie Explorer.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he was like,
He's
yeah,
looked
I've
at
got
that.
yeah, he was like, I've broken that. I've got some individual level videos and stuff. Like, I don't know what Nix's life is like. I don't know,
It's a
like,
good life.
yeah, I just want to know how much information he has that he's just waiting for someone to reach out to him about. He's like, I don't know. It's amazing. It's amazing. He was just ready already. I was like, would you be willing to work with Auth on this? And he's like, I have 12 minutes of time save ready. It's like, it's funny, but it looks right up your alley. I'm excited to watch you get into that more than you should. So
Yeah,
for sure.
So now is the part where we take a trip through time, and when we see you guys next time, we will have already done speedruns, presumably, of these games.
We will be world record holders in just a moment.
All right, so we're back, and it's nice for us to have kind of experienced that again. I think usually when we do these cart swap episodes, we have a tendency to record the first half, 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time, and then we just sort of record the next part later. And this sort of experience, doing these episodes live on the Frame Savers and being able to experience those slightly differently, being able to actually watch through our original exchanging of the games and seeing that, it kind of puts a lot of this in context in, I think, a really nice way. And so I'm going to kick off talking a little bit about Aladdin, more from a review perspective. So I think that this game ended up being really ambitious for what it is. It has a really interesting soundtrack. The graphics are about as good as you can expect from an early PS1 era game. Really short draw distance. The models themselves are really simple, but in general, I think it really holds true to the Aladdin aesthetic. Now, I've only played the PS1 version. That was the version that I was given to play on, and from what I understand, the controls and gameplay are a lot smoother and nicer on the PC version. But the PS1 version does suffer a little bit from some fairly stiff controls, difficult to manage, maneuver. A lot. I think one of the issues here is that because the game was designed for the PS1, and even though it does support the DualShock controller, giving you some analog control in the game, I think it is also designed in a very binary sort of black and white sense. So if you just press up slightly on the controller, Aladdin sort of lunges forward instantaneously. So it's very hard to set up precise movement, and this game does depend at times on a lot of somewhat precise movement, which can make this game pretty frustrating to play. As far as difficulty is concerned, you can save after every single level, and so game overs and deaths are a lot less punishing than they could otherwise be, but there are actual game overs that prevent you from necessarily proceeding in the game. In general, I think sort of for the time that it appeared and for being based off of the Aladdin franchise, I think this turned out to be a pretty solid game. I'd say this is probably somewhere in like the 6 to 7 range, maybe slightly lower than that. It is an above average game by all rights, but it's not necessarily the best game that you could pick on the PlayStation. I would probably give a soft recommend to most people if you find Aladdin. If you like Aladdin and you kind of want to play a 3D game, an early 3D game in that universe, I think that you'd enjoy it, but otherwise, it does have a lot of flaws to it that can make it a somewhat frustrating experience.
Sure.
So, just sort of transitioning into understanding. So when we originally recorded the first half and we gave each other our games, a little bit of background for what was going on in this game at the time. The world record on the PlayStation 1 version was a 1 hour, 10 minute, and 37-second run by Zockerstu. And the PC version hadn't really seen a lot of attention. Some work had been done, but it hadn't been pushed very far. And in fact, they hadn't really settled on whether or not to separate the leaderboards out between the PlayStation version and the PC version. And so because of that, I think that there was a little bit of hesitation to really go really deeply into the PC version because they were somewhat separate games. One of the first things that I did when I started running the game was recommending that they separate the leaderboards, and they did that actually. And I think that that was one of the big impetuses for Zockerstu starting to run the PC version, what seems like pretty much by itself. So it doesn't seem like he has a lot of interest anymore in the PlayStation 1 version. He's really dived in pretty deeply into the PC version. So at this point now, between some routing that I've done and some optimization that I've done, as well as some really cool discoveries by Nick's report, the world record's now been brought down to a 58-58 on the PlayStation 1 version.
Yeah, so my prediction,
Yep.
3 weeks ago slash 5 minutes ago, was I was like, I think this can get sub hour, and you did it. You did it.
I did. I held my ground, and it seemed like it paid off. A sub hour.
My one question though.
Yeah.
Nick's report said he found 12 minutes in time save, but you only saved 11.5 minutes.
Well, I definitely think that the PlayStation 1 version can come down to a 55. One of the things that really separates me from Zockerstu is that Zockerstu is a much more consistent player. He's been playing this for a lot longer. And so his runs are very, very consistent. You know, he doesn't die very often. His movement may not always be as optimized as mine, but that being said, he makes a lot fewer mistakes, and because of that, he really has the potential to pull off a lot better times than I've been able to. In fact, the reason why I'm the world record holder right now for the PlayStation version is pretty much because he's fallen in love with the PC version. I would estimate that if he were still playing the PlayStation version, he would have been able to bring this time much further down. In fact, he's actively playing it right now. It seems like there's a little tiny community of people who are actively working on this. Zockerstu, Mr. Leo Blue, Nick's report has been working on discovering stuff, and I've been playing it, and everyone's playing it really actively. In fact, when I came back to this game, Zockerstu actually posted a PC run the day after I got my 58:58, he posted a PC run that was like a 40 something minute time, which blew my mind until I realized that it was a PC run. I was like, how did he cut that much time off? And then we realized it was the PC version. The PC world record is actually down to a 47:42 now, so more than 10 minutes faster than the PlayStation version, with a lot further to go, really. There's a lot of optimization, a lot of opportunity possible. So it's gonna happen. There's a
Did
lot more room to go on the PC version.
did the PC version have any runs before the podcast?
I think that there might have been some runs of it. They weren't on the leaderboard until I had posted my 58:58 when they finally separated out the leaderboard. But I'm not sure whether or not there had been people doing runs and just not posting them beforehand. There were certainly none on the leaderboard until then.
This is how the podcast affects the world.
It is.
The speedrunning world. Look at us. We've ignited a fire under the Nasiro's Revenge community.
We're making changes, and that's what's really great.
Just because I found it, just because I saw it sitting there on a table.
Absolutely. Now, the PC version has a lot bigger glitches. So the PlayStation version, despite it being a somewhat strange game, seems to be pretty well programmed. There's very few obvious glitches for it. There's one that the PlayStation version has that we refer to as just the Abu skip, which is a stage fairly early on in the run. When you play as Abu in the dungeon, you can actually use him to clip out of bounds and on top of the level, which allows you to bypass a gate that you otherwise have to play a whole level to unlock. But if you can just bypass the gate, you can hit the loading trigger for the end of the level, so it turns a 4-minute level into like a 20-second level instead. So that was one of the big glitches that was originally found, and that's possible on both the PlayStation version and the PC version. But the PC version has a lot more possibility. For instance, like old game facts of this game actually pointed out that you could skip a whole block puzzle in the pyramids by just ground pounding. So there's a mechanic by which when you jump up into the air, you can kind of slam down with your sword, and just does this sort of like area of effect attack around you. You can use that to actually clip through that door to completely skip that block pushing puzzle, and it turns out you can use that mechanic in a lot of places to skip a lot of things. So that's kind of where a lot of these skips are coming from, is being able to just clip through geometry and skip little barriers and boundaries and doors and things like that.
And is this something that's only possible in the PC version, you're saying?
Yeah, the PlayStation version seems to be a lot better about preventing those sorts of collision issues. Now, the previous world record on the PlayStation version actually pretty much did this slide move everywhere. It's this move where Aladdin slides forward, and it's meant to be an attack, but it looks a little bit faster, and in fact, it probably is a little bit faster. But the problem is that with that move, every time you try to start running again, you actually sort of stutter step in such a way that it ends up losing any time you would have saved. And unless you're basically inhuman and using that with perfect chaining at every single moment, it's almost certainly not faster for a human to do. And that's kind of nice it turned out that way, because controlling in that way at all times, constantly trying to slide, it has a fixed length, so you can't slide just a short distance. It has a fixed length like that. It actually made a lot of the movement really, really challenging. And
yeah, it's really nice for you that that ended up being the case, because it did seem like the movement that Zockerstu was doing seemed fairly difficult. So it's nice that you did not have to start chaining those. I remember watching when you first started learning, and you can like jump out of them, right? If it's like frame perfect, basically. Or, I mean, I'm not frame perfect, but
well, there's a timing to it.
Timing, yeah, and that it seemed like that was that's going to be really hard to figure out.
Right.
Yeah, so it worked out for you.
Yeah, if you get the timing just right of jumping out of the slide, you won't stutter step, but it's such a narrow window that you pretty much will always lose time every time you try to slide. So losing that actually made Zockerstu a lot more consistent. You know, once I pointed out to him, I was like, I think the sliding's actually slower. He's like, you're right, and I think that's one of the things that really improved his consistency, and it also makes the game a lot easier to learn. There's also, in the first few levels in Agrabah, there's these genie lamps posted all over the place that are used as tutorials. So you would sort of walk up to it and then genie would appear and talk to you. And you can dismiss it pretty quickly, but it still wastes time. But there's a few of them you can actually skip. If you jump over them in the right way or just avoid them if there's a large enough room, then you can save time by not encountering them. So that's some pretty basic speed tech, is just figuring out how to avoid those genie lamps. Some of them can be pretty tough to avoid. There's one in particular in like Agrabah 2 where it's this very narrow tunnel and the genie lamp is posted right in the middle of the tunnel, and you have to go through the tunnel one direction and jump over it, and then on the way back through you have to jump over it again. If you don't do it both times, then you don't save the time. And so that's kind of important. You can death abuse in this game, so you have 3 lives by default for each continue, and you have 3 continues total. Every time
It's like 45 lives, right?
yeah, that's something like that. But dying doesn't really lose much of anything. There are checkpoints that you can get, so you can make sure that your checkpoint is in a location that you really want to be. You don't lose progress otherwise. You only lose your position, but like if you've activated a switch or something like that, you maintain those when you die. And so that makes it really nice to be able to figure out if it's a level that has some amount of backtracking. You can sometimes use deaths to cut out some of that backtracking. But the other side of that is that you only have a fixed number of lives per continue, and when you game over, the entire level starts over. So you lose your checkpoint, you lose switches that you've hit, you lose doors that you've opened, you lose objects that you've obtained. And so it's important to make sure that you balance your life count appropriately. The earliest versions of the route that I was using had 3 intentional deaths. And so done perfectly, that's exactly the right number. You never have to take a game over. But Zakrastew's most modern PC speedruns actually do take a few extra deaths. So you have to figure out exactly where you want to game over, and you have to balance it appropriately. There's actually 5 deaths now that you take throughout the run. And so getting that exactly right can be really challenging. So these are like the really straightforward, like if you picked up this game, these would be the approaches you would take to speedrunning it. The actual big things that were found were some of the more interesting ones. So I already mentioned Abu Dungeon Skip. So that's the one where you can climb on top of the ceiling. That was found by Nick's report. It sort of abuses, Abu has a ability to kind of double jump. It's more of a wall jump, but the game sort of messes up collision during his double jump animation, and so you can use that to clip out of bounds if you time it just right. The other one was one that I actually found. I'm kind of proud of myself for being able to contribute for a change. Usually I'm depending a lot upon the discoveries of others, but I actually discovered that in the pyramid stages, they did something really clever in the pyramid stages. So in the pyramid stages, they tried to make kind of an open world feel to it. So there's a pyramid 1, 2, 3, and 4, but Pyramid 1 is just sort of a hub world that leads to 2, 3, and 4. And so in the game, if you just go straight into Pyramid 2 and collect the object that you need out of there and then quit back to the menu, you can actually go back to the hub world without having to beat the level. And the game really only cares about you collecting the item. So what I discovered was if you enter Pyramid 2, collect the book, which is the object that you're going there for, and just quit back to the map, you don't actually have to beat the level. You can cut out a minute or 2 in that level. Then you can do the same thing in Pyramid 3. And entering Pyramid 4 doesn't require that you've beaten any levels. It only cares whether or not you found the 2 books. And so you keep those books by quitting back to the map.
Typical author Blues using his big brain to just logically figure out skips.
So my favorite part about that was that one of the books that you have to get is right after this really obnoxious block puzzle where you want to wait for this platform to move into just the right location. Then you activate a platform and you push these things around so that another platform will raise to give you a path to get to where the book is. And in my frustration one day, trying to figure out a way to sort of shortcut this puzzle because it was very obnoxious. Even if you do it exactly the way that you're intended to do it, sometimes it just goes wrong and it loses a ton of time. I was noticing I was just randomly losing 30 seconds because I'd do the puzzle wrong or something like that. And out of frustration, I just looked at the book. I was on stream and I was looking at the book. I was like, that book is where I'm trying to get to. If I can just get to that book, I'll be done. And I was trying to point to it. And so I threw a knife, one of the projectiles, and it collected the book. It's the only object in the entire game where throwing an object at it collects it. And when I discovered that, I found out that I didn't have to do that puzzle anymore, which was a huge moment for me.
That's awesome.
Cut out like another 30 seconds just by not having to do the puzzle in that room, which was a really amazing discovery because I just did not want to do that anymore. Um,
It's interesting speedrun routing, like when you have a section like that that gets you so frustrated, it kind of forces a lot of innovation, right? Because a lot of the time you're trying to route or think of tricks specifically when it's a very frustrating situation. You're like, I keep failing at this, or I don't want to do this every time. It's monotonous. And that's kind of what happened here. Like if it would have been an easier section, you probably wouldn't have found that.
exactly. Yeah, I just when I discovered that the knife got picked up, I just put my head in my hands. I was so frustrated. Like I was so frustrated that I hadn't discovered that earlier. But honestly, there was no reason why I ever would have.
Sure.
It was just one of those moments, just a fluke that I thought to throw something at it out of frustration, and it ended up working. So that was kind of a neat discovery.
You do realize the one big mistake you made.
What?
When you find a trick, you got to name it after yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Now it's pyramid skip. You missed your chance
Yeah, that's
to
the
put your name on the game.
that's the author blues knife, is what that is.
Nailed it.
For posterity. Yeah. Aside from that, there's just a lot of really small things. Like, I think one of the big discoveries was for a while. I say I don't know whether or not it was really known. It probably was known, but at least for myself, I thought that getting a running start on jumps would give me the greatest amount of distance. So I was trying to coordinate like sliding into a jump or running into a jump, and the timing was just really tough for a lot of those. But discovering that jumping from a standstill actually gave you the same amount of distance than from a run allowed me to set up a lot of jumps a lot more easily. And so a lot of jumps that sort of sequence break things, for instance, in the Cave of Wonders, there's a platform that if you stand in just the right spot, you can actually sequence break part of it. I was able to time out some of those jumps. So,
Awesome.
I mean, that's sort of where it lands on that. So right now the world record is 58:58 by me. I'm trying to push it down a little bit further, but I'm going to probably start running the PC version pretty soon because that's where all the hotness is happening. And you got to get in on the ground floor of the fun stuff. So.
Absolutely. Well, that's awesome. Any other thoughts about it? I mean, you glad that you learned to run it? Did we pick a good game for you?
Yeah. I think ultimately it was definitely in my wheelhouse. It was to my taste. I think whether you knew in advance that it was going to be a good speed game or not, I think ultimately it ended up being a really fun speed game. It's very challenging and frustrating. I would certainly recommend it to people. It's a pretty decent PlayStation speed run, and if you can get your hands on the PC version, it's looking to be an even better speed run. So definitely check it out. The PC version just sort of allows you to clip through more doors, so you get to skip more and more puzzles.
Sure.
Clip through a wall and skip doing an entire like 2 or 3 minute out of the way puzzle to just get right through it, and that sort of thing appears in a handful of stages. Like Ancient City, there's like 3 rooms that each unlock another room, but you can just clip through the walls to get to those rooms that are locked, so you get to skip like 3 whole puzzles in Ancient City 3, and it's just repeated throughout the run.
And were those skips known before this, or did Nix find those, or how did that come up?
So the notion that you could skip some of the doors was already known. It was actually mentioned in an old GameFAQs walkthrough of the game that some of the collision was a little bit weird. So some of it was known. Nix found some of it. Zockerstu found some of it on his own with the help of his buddy Mr. Leo Blue. But I think that there's probably going to be more stuff that's found pretty soon as well. So I think the game's just going to keep getting better. Right now, the world record on the PC is 47 minutes, but I think it's realistic to see that coming below 40 even.
So Nasira's Revenge on PC is the hotness right now. So give me a rating from 0 to 10 on the actual pick for Cart Swap.
Oh, like how good do I think you did on a scale of 0 to 10?
Yeah.
I'd say this
I'll
was
do the same.
I'd say this was an 8 or a 9. This was pretty on brand. It definitely matches a lot of the games I've been playing lately, and it turned out to be a pretty cool speed run.
You were frustrated at first. You weren't looking forward to it, and then it just bloomed into something a little bit better.
The learning process was really challenging initially. I was kind of it wasn't a very interesting game to learn initially because a lot of it was just trying to figure out how to navigate some of the levels, but ultimately once I got that under my belt, it turned out to be a lot easier of a game to speedrun. So I'd say it worked well.
Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and take a quick break, listen to some of this fresh music, and then I'll go ahead and talk about my experience with Zen. So now it is my turn to talk about the card swap game given to me. And I got Zen Intergalactic Ninja for the Game Boy, as we said before. And so my review of this game, the graphics in this game are pretty pleasant. I mean, they're not mind blowing for the Game Boy, but they're also, I'd say, a bit more advanced than your typical Game Boy game. And 5 different levels, and they all have kind of interesting backgrounds and little things that you can see. So it's not one of those Game Boy games that's just white in the background because it's hard to do stuff like that. So the graphics are really nice, although the game does lag quite a bit, and I don't know if that fits in graphics. But anytime there's certain enemies where even if just that one enemy sprite is on the screen, it creates lag. So especially if they shoot projectiles or anything of the sort. So, but the game looks nice, and the music is way better than that even. I mean, this game is just filled with bangers. I really loved the soundtrack to this. It's typical Konami in the 1980s 1990s era. They were churning out hits. They were like Matchbox 20, if any of you kids have heard of such a band. But you've been listening to some of them in between. But just all 5 songs honestly are really good. I really especially appreciated levels 2 and 3. Really upbeat, energetic, kind of what you would expect from Konami, similar to Contra and other games they've done. Castlevania, they always have this very intense driving music, and I really, really liked it quite a bit. The controls, on the other hand, this game does not control super well. I think for a casual experience, it does control okay, but the slides don't work the same way sliding does in most games. In a Mega Man game, you're kind of sliding pixel by pixel, and this felt like you were almost sliding in increments. So wherever you could cancel your slide, it's very difficult to cancel it in the appropriate place. It's I don't think I would be using sliding very often if I were playing this casually. It's just kind of maybe a large surface you might see and slide across, but as a casual playthrough, you probably wouldn't find much utility from it. It doesn't really add much to the gameplay in that way, and is kind of clunky and such. The what is it? The iframes, which we'll talk about for the speed run, are really obnoxious kind of on both sides. So it's a bit much. Some enemies just take a long time before you're able to hurt them again. And that can be kind of frustrating with the gameplay for sure. But outside of that, your standard platformer, really reminiscent of Ninja Gaiden Shadow, I would say. It does feel like really similar to that. You know, typical kind of close action fighting. You can charge your bow and shoot something out of it, a projectile out of it, but ultimately that doesn't really feel like something you would need to use that much in casual play either outside of the bosses. So it's mostly of a kind of just a platform and slash things, and it's pretty fun. There's some tight platforming sections which make the gameplay pretty enjoyable. The bosses are fairly interesting. They're not just there right in front of you. They often disappear and then do one move and another move. So they had a lot of different patterns. So it was an interesting game, and I think casually a lot of fun. It doesn't have a lot of replayability, obviously, but for the most part, a really fun game. And I gave it a 6.5 out of 10 for Game Boy Quest. So it's really good. In terms of, I guess the music is so good and the gameplay is decent enough that it's a strong recommend for me if you're a platformer fan or a Game Boy fan, and you're okay with some lag. But if you love the Game Boy, you probably already are okay with some lag, because
So 6.5 out of 10 is a strong recommend for you.
yeah, I mean, five out of 10 is an average game. So if you want to play a platformer on the Game Boy that you've never heard of, obviously you've never played Super Mario Land 2 and the 6 Golden Coins, or you've never played Ninja Gaiden Shadow or some of these other games, then I would recommend those way more.
I'm just
But
saying
for,
6.5 out of 10 being a strong recommend. I can't imagine what like a 9 out of 10 is. That's like
well,
I'm going to show
it's a
up to your
solid
house
recommend.
with the game in hand and I'm going to hit you with it.
It's a solid recommend in the fact that if you have already played all these other hits, I think this is something that you would enjoy for sure.
Okay.
So, okay, whatever.
I'm just
I'll
curious.
find it. You're the one who brought up the strong recommend in the past, and I was,
I'm just curious.
And I don't know what are the other levels of recommend.
I'm going to put this game in my Game Boy. I'm going to hand you the Game Boy, and by pain of death, you will be playing it. That's a 9 out of 10.
That's a strong recommend.
That's a 9 out of 10.
I don't know. I need a more diverse vocabulary apparently to figure out how to
A 10
differentiate
out
all
of
these
10 is
levels.
I'm locking you in my video game dungeon until you've
Oh
confirmed that you've
wow.
beaten the game.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I recommend it. It's good. So going into the speed run, exciting to announce that both of us got world records. So
What?
we came, we conquered. That's why we're flexing on the competition. We're dabbing on the haters, and yep, that's in the YouTube video. You can't do anything about it now.
You just beat me to
So
it. I was thinking
yeah,
about doing it, but now I don't have
really
to.
really exciting that we both, that's kind of a nice moment of pride. We're speedrun podcasters. It's nice to be able to say, we both got world record in our games. So the game you gave me, this Zen game, only had 2 speedrun submissions on the leaderboard at the time. Kirk Q had an 1817, and so I basically went, I mean, there's no route for this game, I guess, right? I mean, it's a left to right platformer, but I did reroute it in terms of where you take damage boosts and finding different tricks, skipping certain power ups he was finding. So the difference in time, I got a 1651, so I beat it by about an hour and a half, a minute and a half, and most of that difference came down to things that I found and some execution as well.
Sure.
There were a couple points where Kirk fell and different things. So, but was fun to find some different, more aggressive strategies. I would say I skipped some health pickups that he was picking up. I also found additional places where you could damage boost or do some different strats to, not slow down or not kill enemies. So some of the I guess tech to this game. The first thing I found was the title screen. If you hit start, the intro part goes away, and that wasn't
Wow.
in the previous world record. So that right off the bat, first run, I'm like, I'm already saving time on world record. I got this.
10 seconds ahead
right?
before the gameplay
Yeah.
even started.
Yeah. So, no, but the text is weird. Most of the in between screens are mashing start, but then some of them are tapping A, like in between the mini games. And then also when there's actual text, the bosses talk to you each time. There's this fun little dialogue with really bad puns about the environment and such. Like the oil level, you tell the boss that they're not that slick and stuff like that. So real burns, and
Nice.
then like the acid rain level, you tell them that you're going to rain on their parade. So it's pretty amazing dialogue, great writing. I'm sure most of the money went into the writing, and I'm really sad that there's no voice acting on the Game Boy. But those texts are the weird ones where you have to hold down A until it hits the end, but then you have to tap A. You know what I'm talking about?
Right.
I hate those text boxes. So like all 3 of those different types of like mashing to get through text was something to be prepared for. The real text that
you always know you're not saving enough time. Every time you do those text boxes, you're like, I could have
it's
done
not
this faster.
optimal because it's like Link to the Past. I never feel like I'm actually passing through the text optimally. One small thing to point out that I thought was cute was in the first level, in the background you see a ship and it's owned by Oil Company. So Oil Co. It says Oil Co. So watch out for Oil Co. Apparently they're going to destroy the earth in the future. So
gotta be careful.
I don't know. Yeah. The sliding is the main mechanic. Sliding is a lot faster than walking in this game, and so you want to slide as often as possible. But you do take a decent bit of, I guess, slowdown when you get hit. It's definitely a freeze while you run into an enemy or their projectile hits you. So damage boosting is not a situation where you're, sliding through enemies and just taking damage. You're actually getting knocked back. So in this game, there's an interesting use of iframes for the speedrun. Everybody has a lot of iframes in this game. You have a lot of iframes. The enemies have a lot of iframes. So a big strategy to this is hitting the enemies and then, sliding through them because you won't take damage for a decent bit of time during their iframes. And so you'll see that quite a bit. If you played Zelda 1, we've talked about in the past, it's a similar mechanic. Someone was saying it's really uncommon to see a game where you kind of abuse the enemy's iframes to this extent. Usually tricks and speedruns are based around utilizing your own iframes. But this game, most of it is utilizing the enemy's iframes to hit them really quickly with your bow and then slide back through them. And it gets a kind of rhythm to it. There's a fairly open window for doing this, but if you watched me right in the beginning of learning it, it did take a pretty decent time for me to get the rhythm down. But once I did, it really gives this game a solid movement tech. It really feels like it starts to flow. It starts to kind of have a nice aesthetic look to it in terms of being a speedrun that is interesting to watch, I would say. It looks different than you would imagine a casual playthrough. You know, some speedruns really mimic casual playthroughs a lot more, and this game kind of gets to flesh out this nice aesthetic movement tech, I believe. I know you had commented that you thought that it started to look kind of interesting
Yeah, I
to
mean
watch.
that's I think that's the nature of a lot of games like this is that when you start off, a lot of the controls being challenging makes your gameplay look sloppy, and so it's easy to look at it and be like, man, this game just looks like crap. But once you really start to master that movement, there's something it just especially with a game like this, it just becomes so fluid.
Mm.
And I think you see that in a lot of games like this, where with how challenging they are, but the tools that they give you, eventually it starts to look really nice once you get the hang of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, Nick's report pointing out just how many times I fell in the first pit because just learning how to cancel out the slides the right length. So you can hold A, and so you hold down an A and you'll slide forever until you're no longer on level ground. So it's not like Mega Man where you hold down an A and then you go, you know, X amount of distance each time. So because of that, you really need to master when to let go of each slide. If you are on even just like a two tile platform, you can hold down, just tap A, and you'll just slide to the end perfectly each time, which is kind of nice. But on all these longer platforms, it's really easy to hold the button too long to fall in the pit or too short to just be losing time because you're not optimally making that distance covered by the slide. And so that timing really took a while for me to get down. And it's a big part of the time save between the previous world record is just kind of getting a little bit more fluid movement throughout the whole run. Timing my I got a lot better than the previous world record, I guess, at you know, timing those hits on the enemies because it's really easy to mess those up and you don't lose the run or anything, but then you take damage, which doesn't give you knockback. I misspoke earlier, but you freeze in place for a bit.
Right.
And so just getting that timing down a little bit more optimally was a big part of the run, and
And
then
sort of
finding places where
balancing where you might want to attack the enemy or take the damage and stop moving for a moment, which is going to be the better choice.
absolutely. And you also utilize your own iframes in certain situations because enemies almost always do 2 pellets of damage, but most of the time they're projectiles or things in the level. Like if there's like a fire that shoots out of the wall or like fire on the ground that does damage to you, almost all of those only do 1 pellet of damage. So it can be really useful in a couple of points to intentionally take damage from a gun or from some fire in the ground, and you can then slide through the enemy in front of you. That saves you 1 pellet overall. And so the more of those you have, you know, you can take some additional damage boosts that you couldn't take previously. So, you know, rerouting that was kind of interesting and fun to do. Most of the bosses in this run are scripted, and all of them are fought with charge shots. You only use charge shots in the speed run against 2 standard enemies because there's these 2 standard enemies that for some reason take an excessive amount of normal hits. I think no enemy takes more than 2 hits except for these enemies, and I think they take 4 or 5 hits. So it saves time to charge up your attack and shoot it. The charged attack does a lot more damage than the standard attack. I believe it might be 4 times the value. I'm not sure.
Does it cost
Um,
anything to charge it up? Like, do you lose any
time.
speed? Can you
No,
slide while you're doing it?
no, you can't slide. You have to actually slash your bow and then hold the button, and then you'll start charging it. So you have to have the animation of slashing the bow, and you also can't
Can you
continue doing your
attack with
movement.
it and then use that attack to start charging up a charge as well?
Yes, you can do that, but you just have to make sure you time things properly because again, the enemy's iframes last. When I say this game has long iframes, I'm talking like 2 seconds
Okay.
each time you hit an enemy or take damage. It's a long thing, and all the bosses have this same thing. So you know, you wouldn't benefit from standing in front of a boss and just smacking it a lot with the bow because these iframes would trigger and you wouldn't be registering hits in between those. So the charge shots are worth the time in between hits because they do a considerable amount more damage, and also you really wouldn't be saving time anyways. And so you use these charge shots on the bosses. Most of them are scripted. There's nothing too interesting about them other than uh, boss of level 4. You're able to hit him a 4th time. It's a much tighter window to get the shortest cycle, so you can actually hit him as he's going back in the volcano. This boss comes out of a volcano, does the same movement every time, then goes back in the volcano, and you can get 4 hits per cycle because you can hit him as he's going down. Even though his sprite is disappearing, it still registers the hit. And so if you time that perfectly, it takes 8 charge shots, so you can get him down. But for the most part, the bosses are fairly uninteresting. The final boss is a hugely anticlimactic situation. Last level is difficult. It's definitely more difficult than the previous levels, but the final boss is I guess whoever you're trying to save is in this bubble that's going up and down, and so you just have to time some shots. It's nothing overly difficult. So the bosses are kind of a trivial part, but if you do miss a cycle or you do maybe miss a charge shot, you can lose a decent amount of time. The charge shots can be strange to charge up because if you're holding charge and if you don't release the button when it's all the way full, it won't shoot a charge shot. So if you let go just a little bit early, you have to redo the whole thing, and so that can cost a lot of time. So being patient and taking that timing is really important. And also similarly, kind of being patient and taking that time when you're hitting enemies can be important, because if you just sit and slash twice, if it's not an enemy or damage boosting through, you won't register that second hit, and you'll end up taking additional damage because of your timing. So
just getting that
it's
rhythm is really important.
Yeah, it's a practice of patience to be able to hit an enemy and just know I need to wait maybe 0.2 of a second before I slash again, or I jump and slash through it in order to get that, because you make that mistake a lot, and I probably did in my PB, I'm sure. But outside of that, with the combat, most of it's fairly simple. The attacks, you can jump kick, you can slash, or you can duck and slash. The duck and slash kind of seems to have a much bigger hurt box than your standard attacks, and so I do tend to use that quite a bit because you can usually spam it twice in a row. If you're able to duck in front of an enemy, they're not higher than you or anything, you can do 2 duck shots just right in a row, and the hurt box lasts a bit longer, I think, than your other attacks, and so it'll actually kill the enemies quicker. So that saves small segments of time throughout as well. Outside of that, there's a decent bit of lag, so I do kill some enemies in certain situations to reduce that. I also just try to adjust to that lag, because sometimes the delay as you're waiting to do that second hit just is considerably longer wait. There's certain sections where you leave a large number of enemies, and all of a sudden it feels like the game speeds. I mean, it does speed up. It's such a stark difference, and I've experienced that in a lot of Game Boy speedruns, so it's not too crazy. If anybody's ever speedrun a Game Boy game, they've almost undoubtedly encountered a significant amount of lag and understood that you'll have to adjust your timing and adjust your strategies to kill more enemies, and it does feel a bit slower because of that. But lastly, there's just these mini games in between the stages. The first one, you just fail immediately as quickly as possible. You're supposed to save all these birds, but you do not care, so you fly, you take your wind, you're on a wind what is it, wind sailing, wind surfing, you're on a wind surfboard. Is it a wind surfer? What are the kids doing nowadays? I don't know.
Wind
so you're on a wind yeah, I guess they're all at windsurfing, I don't know, on their wind surfboards. So you're on the wind surfboard and you jump over these buoys to save the bird. So that's the only one you can just fail immediately and then miss the time. All the other ones are kind of on a set time. I believe if you shoot the cans, there's these cans getting thrown into the ocean. If you shoot them a little bit earlier than you could, like you can aim your cursor on it, faster or slower, depending on where it spawns and how quickly you do it. I think you can save a little bit of time, at least depending on how quickly you kill the last one. But all the other mini games, there's really no time to save. But they are rewarding, because after the second mini game, the first one you fail, but after the second mini game, it tells you nature is saved.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah. So you kept those cans out, so none of the dolphins ate the cans. So it was great. Outside of that, that's it. I mean, the end, it says Lord Contanimus is defeated. That's good. That's good
what
news.
We wanted, right?
Yeah, we wanted that. He was working with Oil Co. He was polluting the planet.
He was saying mean things about Earth Day, which I think is really silly.
Yeah, he was very anti-Arbor Day, which was, offended me for sure. But in all seriousness, the speed game is a lot of fun. I think more people should run it. It's one that has interesting movement tech that I think a lot of runners would probably enjoy. It has, I wouldn't say bad controls, but it doesn't have, pinpoint precise controls, and that may frustrate some people. Chad loves games with bad controls because it kind of just adds a unique flavor to it. I got a sense of that of doing this. Like, I ended up enjoying the bad controls because it does make you more proud when you do really optimal movement when the game just isn't designed to encourage optimal movement, right? And
Right.
so I think struggling with those bad controls and then getting to turn that into a product of a run that looks really clean and smooth and makes it look like it has good controls is really cool. So I recommend the speed game. It's pretty fun. I think it could get pushed down to maybe low 16. Kurt Q had estimated he thought maybe a 15 was possible. I'm not quite sure if that's the case or not, maybe in a task level, but I think RTA, somebody could definitely come and put a lot of time into it, maybe get a 1630 or so, 1615 maybe if they're really good or found some new stuff. So I definitely strong recommend on the speedrun. The speedrun's better than the casual game for sure.
Oh
It's,
yeah, definitely.
I would give you an 8 out of 10 for the pick that you made. So definitely we both I think did much better this time. We both gave each other 8 or 9s out of 10. We both got games that we normally run, so that's fun.
That's nice. That's what you
I
like to
don't
see.
want to be you. I don't want to be you. You're
Okay.
too tall. The air's too thin up there.
I get
can't
really
do it.
lightheaded up here.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. So we're gonna go ahead, take a quick break, and then hop into your Q&A. So this and every week, we like to answer your questions that you give to us either through our Discord channel or in our Twitch chat when we're recording these live. So we are recording this live on twitch.tv/theframesavers. If you are in the chat and you're like, I had this question and I should have asked it, just post it in there now. Like,
It's not too late.
You got a couple seconds. But the first question comes in from somebody named John Carls, which is me. And I want to say, first of all, say happy anniversary, question mark? Yeah, I mean, that's not a question, but so how do you feel about the past year? Let's talk about our favorite episodes from the past year.
Well, I turned 30 this year, so it wasn't great.
Wow. 30 is the new 40, first of all. Or no, 30 is the new 20.
No.
I'm sorry, first of all.
Wait, that makes it worse.
30 is the new 20, first of all. So you're living your best life. You're in your prime right now. You're at your peak.
That's true. I'm the
Men hit
best
their
me I've ever
physical
been able to
peak,
be.
like between 30 and 32 or something. So you're still doing good.
That's
I'm on
nice.
my way out.
I missed 25 personally.
Oh, you skipped it? Like you missed it? Like you went 24
No,
to
I miss
26?
it. I'm not playing these wordplay games with you, John. I'm getting too old for this.
Okay, well, answer my question then. What were your favorite episodes of the past year?
So I jotted down a few of them. Star Tropics listener selected number 4. Was probably my favorite one this year. And the reason for that is because I got to play Star Tropics, and I think that game's rad. And I'm really glad that I got to play it because
Yeah, when are the speed runs? What happened to that?
Oh, you got to understand, my life
It's
is all
on the
about
list.
my life is all about promising big and then not following through.
Nice.
But maybe eventually we'll see. It's a demanding game, and I'd like to take some time to do it. But I mean, I'd like to work on Super Metroid this year and a bunch of other stuff. So we'll see.
Well, that's another one. That's the one I was going to point out. I thought Super Metroid was a good episode. Feels like it was longer ago, but that was within the last year. Really enjoyed playing that for the first time. Neither of us had ever played it. I think we had really good experiences getting forced to sit through the whole game, right? And also just kind of experience that together. Check that off our bucket lists. I think that's a game we both had on our bucket lists where it's like, I just want to beat this almost so that people can stop saying, you've never played Super Metroid? So now nobody can say that to me. I mean, they can. And
they shouldn't. They should avoid
it. Would be just as annoying, but at least I would be in the right for once.
Yeah,
it doesn't happen often.
Our second anniversary was episode number 50. And since then, I mean, we go as far back as like Mega Man X, Quackshot, Super Metroid. Those were some of the first episodes of year 3. So, I mean, it feels like those were ages ago, but here we are.
Absolutely.
Go
ahead.
I was gonna say another one I had in mind was when we did Super Mario 64 on the Speed Gaming Network. We did that
Yep.
episode with Blue Bob SRL. I think that episode was really cool. It's about one of those big games, and I think we really did a great job, or at least tried to do a great job covering. It's always hard to talk about one of the titans in the speedrunning community, and I think that we gave it the coverage that we're capable of. So
Absolutely. To go along with that, Bad Games number 9 was one of my favorite episodes we did. That's the McDonald's games episode.
okay,
I think we both talked afterwards and we were just like, we really did way better at that than we should have, right? That
yeah.
episode came out way better than it should have. We just found enough interesting information. It just ended up being a really solid episode and was kind of fun. You have these really good episodes that are Super Metroid and Dragon Warrior, but to have a really solid episode about McDonald's games felt really good. And it was fun to research those games and play through them actually. So
That's true. So there's also the Dragon's Trap we did with Sebastian Ross. He is one of the devs for the Dragon's Trap. It was the first and only time that we've ever done or ever had a game dev on an episode. There's certainly a growing partnership between speedrunning communities and their game devs, if for no other reason than speedrunners provide a lot of free QA. But that being said, that is a game that was near and dear to my heart. Both me and Tina originally blind raced it. She played it at GDQ, and we met Sebastian Ross at AGDQ, where he was on the couch for it. And that's where we originally invited him to be on the podcast, and it was really great that he agreed to do that. And I think that episode turned out fantastic.
absolutely. I would say it was nice to finally have done a Link to the Past randomizer episode. That was fairly recently, but we had Andy Lasso on, and I think that episode was really cool. I really enjoyed kind of diving into a game and kind of a competitive thing. It's
Yeah.
a much different kind of episode than our normal episode. We kind of can get in a rhythm of talking about the same kind of things, not the same kind of things, but the same format, focusing on a game. And so to focus on a game that doesn't have a set speed run to it, and to talk about speed running it or playing it fast at least, was really a lot of fun. So I enjoyed that quite a bit.
Yeah, I feel like this year has been marked by us taking a lot of risks with new types of content, talking about things that we would have really shied away from historically,
Yep.
and trying new things. I mean, that kind of goes hand in hand with a lot of the new projects that we're working on. We've got things in the pipeline, and I think that this is kind of what I would say year 3 has been all about for us, is just trying a bunch of new stuff. I
Mhm.
think earlier on in our podcast, we would not have felt confident enough to have a game dev on an episode. It would have just
Yeah.
been probably a little bit too ambitious for us, but we just went with it, and I think it turned out great. And I think here's to the beginning of year 4. Next episode is the start of year 4 of the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the last 8 months maybe have been markedly better than either of us ever thought the podcast would get. So we've been really proud of the stuff that we've made, not to, be too prideful, but I think we've been really proud of how things have developed. We look back at how episodes previously were, and we feel like we've made a lot of progress. I hope we continue to make progress. One more question for you, and I can answer it first so you can think. But before we move on, what was your favorite pocket of mine the past year? And I will tell you
Ooh.
my favorite pocket of yours the past year.
Okay, go for it. I'll look through yours while you're telling me about your favorite one of mine.
Yeah. I think my favorite episode of yours, my favorite pocket, was the we esports now. Again, like you said, we have been tackling different types of podcasts. I could also say the Hip Tanaka one, but we've been trying to think outside the box a little bit, think outside of our formula, and cover some subjects or topics that maybe don't normally fit our standard brand of content. And that was a really cool episode. I really liked that idea, and I think it came out well. So it was fun to be able to get information from an actual esports team and talk about kind of our hobby from an objective standpoint. It's kind of the second one of those I would say you've done, because previously you had done the Death of Speedrunning podcast, which was over a year ago, pocket, and that was kind of more commentary on where's the community at, where's the community going, and so that was a nice episode. I really liked it.
So my favorite of yours outright is probably your Yo Noid episode you did with Jakku.
Okay.
But I think what made that one really special is that it was a game that you were having fun with, and Jakku lended a lot to it. So I don't
Hmm.
know if that's necessarily fair to give you one that I feel is marked by your guest really adding a lot to it. I think my
Hmm.
favorite one of yours on its own was probably your Adventures of Star Saver one.
Hmm.
Because that's a game that I really loved, and I thought that there was a lot of really great, interesting content there. I also was sort of tied with the Yonoid one. I also thought that your episode with Proto Magical Girl
Absolutely.
doing Ninja Gaiden Shadow was a great episode. I
Yeah.
think you've done a really great job of figuring out how to invite guests on for pockets and really condense down a lot of information into like a really solid, manageable chunk. I think that's something I've struggled with as well. I've wanted to do pockets where I invite guests on, but I'm not very good at turning a lot of information into like 30 minutes. And
Hmm.
so I think that that's something that you really excel at.
Thanks, bud. Well, I enjoyed all of those pockets. I'm enjoying the idea of the things we're going to be doing soon. I hope to enjoy them. And I am looking forward to the next year. Absolutely. I don't think we're slowing down right now. So
Mm-mm.
that's been that the pockets have been something we've only done for what, a year and a half, 2 years. And I
Something
think
like that.
we've kind of started to get to enjoy doing some of our outside of the box thinking for those. And that's been one of my favorite things of the past year is some of that outside of the
Yeah,
box
Pocket
thinking.
number
So,
one was October 2016, so we're coming up on 2 years of Pockets.
wow, that's crazy. That is crazy talk. So let's move on to our next question. The celebration is over, I guess.
Yep.
Your hat's off your head now, so that's a bummer. So San Dimas 1988 asks from our Discord, John Carls, as a big proponent of Game Boy and someone who owns every game, do you ever actually play on original Game Boys or any handhelds from the Game Boy line? That's a really good question. No, not really at all. I have tried to do it more. So I had a backlit Game Boy Pocket that I had, a modded one, and was trying to use that for a bit, but I had some issues with it and ended up selling it and ordering a pretty pricey Game Boy Advance mod. So the old school Game Boy Advance, but with the really nice backlit from the clamshell Game Boy Advance put into it and, kind of custom colors. But it shrinks down original Game Boy games a really small amount. So when you have the normal screen, and it looks gorgeous when you're playing, say, put in Metroid Fusion, but when you put in a Game Boy game, it's taken up half of the space that it was previously. So it's just too small to enjoy. So I've been considering getting a Game Boy Light, which is a Game Boy that only came out in Japan. That's a Game Boy Pocket with a backlight, or I know Hyperkin is possibly I think we talked about this literally on Grand Pooh Bear's podcast, the Warp World
Mm-hmm.
podcast. But Hyperkin's coming out with a backlit Game Boy that you can put Game Boys in,
Yeah,
which
it'll
I think
actually
is a
take.
terrible idea.
Yeah,
Terrible idea. I
it'll
don't know
actually
why.
take cartridges, and you and I are the only two people who will be interested in it.
Yeah, and it plugs in and charges through like USB-C or something. So it's a great idea if I'm the only person on earth and you're selling to me. I don't think it'll sell well, but I'm probably gonna get one. So I'm excited about that. So one of those two will do it. But no, if you tried to play an original Game Boy Color, in the last, or even a Game Boy Advance that's not the AGS 101, you've probably stopped after about 10 seconds. I don't know how he did it. I don't get it. It's you can't see on it, and it's a funny thing because I don't think I could speedrun any of the Game Boy games I speedrun on a Game Boy
What
either.
game's in my Game Boy
So
right now? Oh, Tetris.
it's Tetris.
I've got Tetris in my Game Boy right now.
Yeah, but you have a DS cart of Style Savvy on top of it.
I know my parents found this at their house, and they said, "Is this yours?" And I said, "Good God, no!" But
If you think it's creepy that I knew what was on his desk, I just visited off and I figured he didn't clean in the last 2 weeks. So
I haven't.
okay, so next
So
question, it's
yeah,
from Andy J Retro, and it says, "How do you go about choosing games for each other?" So Chad, how did you go about choosing my game?
So I knew I wanted to pick a Game Boy game since we were trying to do more of, picking games that the other will really enjoy. I mean, Game Boy is John's wheelhouse. It's pretty easy to figure out what to pick for him in that regard. But I knew what I ultimately wanted was a game that did not have a lot of runners, that was a platformer, and that he either had played and really liked or hadn't played. And so my way was probably more scientific and less interesting. Mine
Hmm.
was I went on to speedrun.com. I filtered the list of games down to just Game Boy games, and then I reverse sorted it by the number of runners. And so I started going through games that had only one runner, only two runners, and every time I'd find a game that looked interesting, I'd look at a video for it and see whether or not that sounded like it would be a good fit. And I finally, after going through probably 50 or 60 games, ended up landing on
Wow, that many
well,
games.
you have to remember, if I reverse sort the list, I'm looking at games with 0 or 1 runner initially. So it's a lot of really crappy stuff at the bottom of the
Hmm.
heap. It took me a while to get to something that I thought would be a good fit for you, and
You watched videos for 50, 60 games?
yeah. I mean, just
Wow.
just Google and find a clip of it, watch for about 30 seconds, and say, yeah, this looks good, or no, it doesn't.
My dude, just putting in the work to make me happy. I'm
What can I
touched.
say?
I'm touched, buddy. Okay, so Dr. Love here. I'm gonna give a little love advice, okay? Because this is a good metaphor for romantic relationships, right? When you or friendships or whatever, when you're trying to get a gift for somebody, people just think like, oh, you need to like, just like figure out the thing they want, whatever. But like, you got to put the work into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not just like, oh, I had this on a whim or whatever. So like, you took it to a science.
Yeah.
You're like, no, I'm gonna put in this algorithm, whatever. And the other thing, the big love lesson is you got to have communication.
Yeah.
You were like, don't give me a Game Boy game, and it was a big reason why I didn't give you a Game Boy game.
I appreciate
It's
you not giving me a
communication.
Game Boy game.
So like if your significant other is giving you like a tie and you're like, I don't like ties, then you got to communicate. You got to say, I don't like ties. And see, we've moved on. You gave me a tie and I was like, I don't want a tie anymore. And there
So
you go.
that's so good, John. I'm gonna apply this to my real life
I hope you all find love out there. So
with Game Boy
for
games.
for me, I knew I wasn't going to give him a Game Boy game. So I considered, I think I considered looking through the NES library. I know you're a big NES fan, but I've noticed you've been doing a lot of 3D platformers the last year, a year and a half, I would say, starting with Bubsy 3D, but then with Darkened Sky and what other ones have you done?
Episode one,
Friend and
PlayStation.
Freckles you've been
Yeah,
doing.
Flynn and
Yeah.
Freckles, episode one,
So
PlayStation 1.
so I figured that was something in your wheelhouse, and I was at East Starland. I don't know if I talked about this in the intro. I think I mentioned it briefly, but I was at East Starland, which is my local video game store, and they had a bunch of games out in the back that didn't have nice enough labels to put in the retail part, and they usually sell them kind of flea market style, and you can actually, barter and negotiate prices and maybe get a lot of games so you can cut down the price. So it's a lot of fun if you're a collector. And so I was just poking around there and saw this PlayStation 1 disc that or PlayStation 1 game that was an Aladdin game, and I was like, ooh, that looks interesting. And I know you had spoken to me before about possibly learning Hercules, I think, on PlayStation 1.
Yeah,
So
Herc's
I'm like,
Adventures.
he's open to some, Disney / cartoonish stuff on the PS1. Maybe he'd like this. And so I went ahead and bought it because it was well under the value, thinking I'll look into it, and if it looks terrible, I can just resell it and make a profit. And
Sure.
so looked at the speed run. It looked okay. It didn't look super interesting, but it also, I could see that there were a lot of routing improvements that could be done. And I know you off loves routing improvements. He loves to route games. That's why he's run so many games before anybody else did, because he wanted to just go from nothing to putting a route together. And then the nail in the coffin, or the candle on the cake, I don't know, something more positive than a nail in a coffin. But I reached out to Nick's report and just brought up the game, and he was already just like, boom, we've got something. I'm like, I know Chad loves working together with Nick's report, breaking them 3D games. This is going to work. And I was a little bit worried in the beginning, though. You started doing it and you're not loving it, but I'm glad to hear it came around.
Well, I think you had the same response to Zen initially. You were like, this
Yeah.
game's so slow and it's frustrating, and
Yeah.
you did it as your 12-hour challenge, so you kind of set it up as, this is my 12-hour challenge. And I noticed that you were like 4 hours in and you hadn't even gotten through the first level, because you were trying to solidify the mechanics. But I think most people's approach is just to try to consume it all at once. And so you were 4 hours in and hadn't even gotten past the first level, and I was like, this isn't a good sign. So
Yeah, I realized I'm a person who usually gets world record their first or second completed run. Like, I put a lot of time into actually just learning the levels now, and I just trying to get a nice solid stage 1, stage 2, and I probably should do more no reset runs when I'm doing things like that. But I had a good time. I enjoyed it for sure.
Okay.
The Bruceinator 84 asks, "What is that tan liquid that John Carls is always drinking?" That sounds weird. That's a weird sounding
It's the
question.
vape juice. He just drinks vape juice.
I'm always drinking a good old LaCroix, the coconut flavor, or iced coffee, which is black right now because I'm out of half and half. But
Okay.
I literally only drink water, coconut flavored water, and coffee. Those are the only three things I drink in my life. So it's got to be one of those three. And if it's brown, I'm hoping it's the coffee. That's all I'm saying. So.
It's not a great look for you. It's the vape
Absolutely.
juice.
Yeah.
So Smartball asks, did the anti-Arbor Day notes in this game give you the drive to conquer it? Do you feel like it was your own resolve and your love of the planet that made you decide that you needed to personally defeat Lord Contanimus?
Sure. It's a great question. Great question. I would say, I mean, I was brainwashed as a child by the propaganda that is known as Captain Planet. So I did watch that television show, and the liberals made me love the planet. They did it. So yeah, I was motivated.
It's a shame when you let the liberals win.
Yeah, I realized I didn't want to destroy the planet, so I felt like being on that side. And when someone's named Lord Contanimus, it just feels like you should be on the other side of whatever's going on.
That's a good
my
point.
opinion. Yeah,
That's
so,
a really good point.
Yes, I did.
So our last question here is from Crazy Awesome, and he asks, "What is your favorite GBA speedrun?" Which I think is a really great question.
You want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, it's ultimately a tough one for me because there's a lot of games that I think are really cool GBA speedruns that I just don't want to speedrun myself. My favorite GBA speedrun, it's probably going to be the GBA version of Super Mario Brothers 2, which maybe feels like a little bit of a cop-out because it's a port, but it's kind of a fun port that I really do like. So I would say either that. I just recently discovered today from my buddy Moogle that there was a really good Mummy GBA game that looks basically like a Shantae game that was also made by WayForward. So my answer might change. I might discover that is my new favorite GBA speed game. Who knows?
Sure. I don't know a lot of GBA speedruns to be fair. I would say I do enjoy watching the Minish Cap. The times I've watched that, it seems like a really good game and it has some interesting tech. I really enjoyed the person who asked this question, Crazy Awesome, used to speedrun Max Payne on the Game Boy Advance.
Okay.
And it was a really enjoyable speed game. It's very different. It's an isometric, like very intense, fast-paced, three-dimensional platform. Like you'd like roll and shoot people a lot. I don't know how to explain it. I mean, it's not really a platformer, but that's a fun one to watch as well. I think the best GBA speedrun will be when I finally speedrun Rocky for the Game Boy Advance, which is going to happen. It's on my bucket list. If I was going to retire from speedrunning right now, I've got like a list of things. It's like you got to get that done, and I want to route and speed, even if it's 3 hours of literally nothing. Even if it's like Mega Man Soccer speedrun where you just go in the corner and like nothing interesting happens. That's got to be the best GBA game.
Okay, so I looked up my list of speedruns to see what I've actually played on the GBA.
Yeah.
And it turns out there's one that I forgot. Well, two, but there's two that I forgot that I do want to give honorable mention to. There are two Shrek games on the GBA that actually turned out to be kind of fun speedruns back in the day. It's Shrek Wreakin' Havoc and Shrek Hassle at the Castle.
I remember that.
And they're both really just goofy games. One of them's just pretty much a straight up side scroller, but the other one is sort of a side scrolling platformer / beat 'em up mixed with an adventure game. That was pretty cool. So those both get honorable mentions from me. Someone please beat my times in those games because story mode I don't have the world record, or sorry, Hassle in the Castle I don't have the world record in anymore, but I still have the world record in Wreakin' Havoc, and that seems like a problem.
Wow. Also, kind of hilarious that Moogle pops in chat and says there's also a Mummy MMO he just found out about. So I don't
the Mummy game library goes real deep. I'm just gonna tell you that.
Is it all based on the movie? I never saw the movie.
There were like 3 movies, and the thing is that once The Rock started getting involved in them, like once he was a prominent figure in them, they basically threw away Brendan Fraser. They're like, your services will no longer be required, and they started just making a bunch of movies about The Rock's character.
Oh, so there's been more since the ones that were with Brendan Fraser?
I guess I'm not a Mummy aficionado.
I feel like The Rock would be a better mummy fighter than Brendan Fraser, to be fair. Brendan Fraser, not the most action hero-y person I've ever seen, that's for sure. But,
Okay.
I mean, he did make Encino Man and George of the Jungle, so what am I to say? I think that's it. I think that is all of our Q&A. So where, if they're looking for us, can they find us, Chad?
You can find me at my home. I'm currently there right now, and I will
Okay.
probably be here until tomorrow when I go to work.
Okay, perfect. I will also be at my home, probably forever. I'm probably never leaving that door. So this is my home now. This is where I live for the
Yeah,
rest
so
of my
you can
life.
find me at twitch.tv/author_blues. You can find me on Twitter and YouTube both as Author Blues. You can find all of our podcast stuff at www.theframesavers.com, which maybe by the time this episode actually releases might look a little different. But we're currently going through a bit of a redesign, a cleaning of house, if you will, making some changes to the website to facilitate some of the projects we've got upcoming. Turns out I had to turn into a web designer to make this all happen. But
I did a lot of work on it too.
I know you did. John
really
cheered me on
typing
every
away.
step of the way. I told him I'm working on this, and he said, "I believe in you." And I thought that was really great of him. John, where can they find you?
You can find me and my motivational speeches and love advice at twitch.tv/John Carls, and on Twitter and Twitch is John Carls. Did I say John? YouTube at John Carls1. Also, if you're finding us on theframesavers.com, you can check out our Discord and join that. That's where we get some of our Q&A questions. It's also where you can kind of join in on a lot of stuff. We are currently, by the time this airs, in the podcast app, this will be over, but this is where a lot of people are interacting with our upcoming listener selected episode. So definitely check that out. And we want to give a shout out. Also, there's a link there to our Patreon, which is patreon.com/theframesavers. We have some $25 a month patrons. Tina Hacks, previous guest on our Wonder Boy not on our Wonder Boy episode. On our Shantae episode?
Yeah, on our Shantae episode.
On our Shantae episode, Mr. Pizak, he's an NES classic speedrunner. Kip, K-I-P-P, he's involved in the Super Metroid community. And also Drex, D-D-R-R-E-E-X-X, who's a great late night streamer. Go follow all of them. There are $25 a month patrons. And if you want your name shouted out here, go ahead and check there. Drop us $25 and you'll basically become partner. I mean, I'm not partner, but you'll become partner just from the plugs. And I don't know, probably get Instagram famous. You'll probably be able to do some promotions for like some teeth whitener on Instagram or something. It'll be a big deal. So I'd go ahead and do that. Shout outs to Warp World Podcast, we mentioned earlier. Regarding one of our favorite podcasts we've done. They are at podcast.warp.world. They're a partner podcast with us. They're kind of our buddies, and they do a lot of, current video game news and such like that. What's going on at the E3 or what's going on with Ninja, stuff like that. So go check them out. And thanks as always to Brian Morgenthaler at BMorgs TV for producing the podcast, and for Space Cow 2455 for helping to organize Q&A. Any last thoughts about this third cart swap?
Have you figured out what you're going to give me for cart swap number 4?
No.
Okay.
Does that help? Have you figured out what you're going to give me?
Yes. I'm going to give you all of my love, affection, and support. And
I hope you all know that we love and support you. Thank you so much for 3 awesome years doing the podcast. We really appreciate it.
Here's
Until next
12
time,
more.
Well, here's to at least 3 more episodes. Until then, we'll see you later. Bye.